Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear brothers and sisters in Islam, welcome back to another edition of Wednesday Q&A. As always, if you have any questions, please send me an email, mufti@islamstl.org. We will inshallah try to answer your questions. So several questions we have today that we will go over. First off, someone asked that I have heard that du'as are readily accepted when reciting Surah Al-An'am, verse number 124, in which the word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the name of Allah, comes twice together, one after another, such that a person should supplicate after pausing at the first Allah, meaning you saying the word Allah, then pausing, and then continue with the recitation. So what is this verse that the person is talking about? In Surah Al-An'am, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا جَاءَتْهُمْ آيَةٌ قَالُوا لَن نُؤْمِنَ حَتَّى نُؤْتَى مِثْلَ مَا أُوتِيَ رُسُلُ اللَّهِ Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata. So at that point, Rasulullah, and then Allahu a'lamu haythu yaj'alu risalata. So that's the verse that they are talking about over there. Now, the meaning of this verse, first of all, whenever there comes to them a sign, yani verses of the Quran, then they say that we shall not believe until we are given directly that which is given to the Rasuls of Allah. Allah knows best to whom He should give His message. So this question that we will just address regarding the aspect of acceptance of dua, this is not mentioned in any particular hadith or narration from the earlier predecessors, but as always, there are some experiences of pious predecessors, or hikmah, you can say, where they have recited this verse and then made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it has worked for them, and it has been something that has been efficient for them. So as long as one does not have the belief that this is a sunnah, or it's something that must be done, or somebody's blameworthy for not doing it or whatnot, then it is fine to act upon it. But one should avoid doing something like that, like in salah and things like that. Otherwise, making dua, we know that the Quran itself is a means of shifa, and it means of various things as well. Subhanallah, like the ayat of the manzil and all these different things that are used for various matters. So it's something that can be done, but one should just not have the belief that it is a sunnah or anything like that. Okay, next one. Can the Quran be recited in the presence of a deceased person before the ghusl, or before the washing of the deceased has been done? There's actually a difference of opinion with the fuqaha, or the jurists, regarding this matter about the recitation of the Quran in the presence of the deceased before one has been washed. So some scholars suggest that it is something which is disliked until the deceased has been washed, until the ghusl has been done, while other scholars suggest that it is permitted except when the deceased is being washed. So at the time when the deceased is being washed, then no recitation at the time, but otherwise before or after, it is permissible to do that. Now, the preferred view, according to the fuqaha, is that the Quran can be recited before the ghusl is done on the deceased body, as long as there are no visible impurities that are on the body. Now, we know that generally speaking, the deceased are generally covered for the most part. At times, only the face would be visible. So there's no harm in reciting the Quran before the deceased is washed. But of course, we know that the deceased should also be washed as soon as possible and buried as soon as possible as well. But of course, we know that at times there can be delays with these types of things as well. Okay, next question. Are there any differences between qurbani or udhiyah and sadaqatul fitr? So we know at the end of Ramadan, before Eid, we have to give our sadaqatul fitr, and then we know at the time of Eid al-Adha, the qurbani has to be done. So what are the differences between both of these things? So there are several differences that are between these two things. Number one, the qurbani or udhiyah is not necessary on behalf of non-baligh children, according to the preferred view, whereas sadaqatul fitr is necessary to be given on behalf of minor children. But udhiyah, it's not necessary to slaughter the animal on behalf of the child. However, If somebody has the means to do so, then it is still preferable that one do that. Secondly, Qurbani cannot be given in advance of the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, unlike Sadaqatul Fitr, which can be given before the day of Eid. It can be given anytime prior to the 1st of Shawwal, but Udhiyah has to be done after the Eid Salah, as we know. Thirdly, Sadaqatul Fitr has to be given to poor people, to needy people. Qurbani or Udhiyah is such that it's an act of sacrifice. Therefore, the meat can even be consumed by anyone, including the person himself who has sacrificed. Fourthly, and that, of course, the meat can be given to the needy as well, but it is not necessary to do that. But it is good to do that as well, to give at least some to them. Fourthly, Sadaqatul Fitr can be discharged by its value. So we know Sadaqatul Fitr from a technical standpoint, it was given in terms of barley or the type of sha'ir, flour, or dates, whatever, in that type of thing. But we normally give money as a value because that's what's useful for many people. But udhiyah cannot be given in value. The actual sacrifice has to be done. That is an important thing as well. So those are just some differences between the two, between both the Sadaqatul Fitr as well as the Qurbani or the Udhiyah. Okay, next question we have is, or if Qurbani or Udhiyah is performed on behalf of our deceased relative, can we eat from it? So there are two possibilities here. Number one, if the Udhiyah is performed from the wealth of that person who is deceased based on their instruction, then in that case, the scholars say it is necessary to donate all of the meat to the needy, and one cannot eat from that. However, if the udhiyah is performed from one's own wealth on behalf of their relative that they do, then the udhiyah is considered the person who sacrifices it and they own it. Therefore, they are allowed to eat from it. So that is the opinions. Those are the opinions that are given by the scholars in this particular regard. Next question: Can you confirm that the maximum period for breastfeeding is 2 lunar years? I have heard people say that one can breastfeed for up to 30 months or 2.5 years. Is this true? Now, according to most scholars, including the students of Imam Abu Hanifa and others, they mention that the maximum period of breastfeeding is 2 lunar years. However, Imam Abu Hanifa himself has mentioned that the maximum period is 30 months or 2.5 years. The Ahnaf have given fatwa on both views, although the majority prefer the first view of 2 years. So it's better that one stops at 2 years. However, in the case where the baby is possibly weak or needs more nutrition in that way, then in that case, there is flexibility in continuing this for up to 30 months. And the ruling is the same whether it's for boys and girls. Okay, next question. Can a few drops of breast milk be given to a child older than the period of breastfeeding to receive some COVID antibodies, even though the drops of milk would be given separately, and they would not be drinking from the breast itself, but it would be given separately. So the answer is no. Even if they are given the milk separately, even if it's just a few drops, if they are over the age of 30 months, it is not permissible to give any drops of breast milk to the child, even in that particular case. Okay, next question. Is it permissible for a person to allocate the 7th share of a udhiyah cow? So, for example, a cow or a camel in Islam, if you sacrifice one of those animals at the time of udhiyah, it can be divided into 7 shares because of how large the animal is. So a person is asking that if the 7th share, is it permissible to allocate that share for aqiqah? Meaning, can you do udhiyah and then can you allocate the 7th share for aqiqah? If one has a daughter, right? So there's 6 shares of qurbani or udhiyah and then 1 share for aqiqah. Is it permissible to do that? So the answer to this is that if a person does udhiyah of a large animal such as a cow, then it is permissible to allocate a share for aqiqah. However, it is still preferred, it's preferable that a goat, if a daughter is born, then a goat or a sheep is slaughtered separately for aqiqah. And the reason why it's preferable is because that's the way it is understood from the ahadith and as well as the statement of the jurist. But if it's difficult for someone financially or something like that, then in the case it is permissible to do that. Okay, a person says that my zakat due date is in the month of Shawwal. However, I wish to donate my zakat in Ramadan. Is this permissible, and can zakat be given in advance? So the answer is zakat can be given in advance of one's zakat anniversary or due date. Um, and there of course there are always times where when emergencies occur around the world or whatever it may be, or through someone locally, one actually should give zakah early. But when one's zakah due date comes, then one should make any necessary adjustments based on their zakatable assets that they calculate on the day that their zakat is due. So it's possible that they could still owe more if they have more in their possession. So they should always calculate on that day and make sure that they pay the difference at that particular time. Now, if you look at the other end of the spectrum, that say, for example, if somebody's zakah is due in Sha'ban, but one wants to wait till Ramadan to give their zakat. No, one cannot do that. One must always pay their zakat on the due date or before the due date and not delay it. It's like salah, for example. We cannot delay our salah. So zakat also cannot be delayed once one's due date comes. Okay, if a person lost money, say for example, if a person lost $1,000 a few years ago, and it's something that they did not expect to get returned, but all of a sudden somebody found, maybe they lost their wallet, for example, and then 3 or 4 years later somebody returns their wallet and it has that $1,000 in it. So is zakah due on this amount for the last 3 years? So the answer to this is that there is no zakah that is due upon this for the last 3 years. However, zakah will be due in the future if it is still in one's possession. And this is because, of course, the return of that money was something which is completely unexpected. Now, in case where somebody lended money to another person and is expected to receive that back, then zakat is due on that, according to the stronger opinion. Which brings us to another question, and the final question that kind of has to do with that scenario. So, say, for example, that Zaid, we'll just give an example of a name here. Zaid sold his house on the 1st of Rajab for, let's just say $100,000, even though nowadays you can't really get a house for 100,000. But Zaid sold his house for $100,000 on the 1st of Rajab. The buyer took possession of the house, but for some reason he was unable to make the payment immediately and paid 3 months later. But Zaid's zakat due date came before the time that the person was able to pay that amount. So is it necessary that zakat has to be given on that $100,000 that he does not have in his possession, but that he is expecting later on? So the answer to this, again, as I said, is that the jurists or the fuqaha, they have mixed views in relation to this, as it is considered a debt of intermediate strength. So the chosen view in this is that zakat, or the stronger view in this is that zakat is necessary in this regard and zakat should be given. However, if a person is in a state where they are struggling, for example, if they are also trying to purchase another house, which was after the zakat anniversary, and they don't have that money in their possession, and paying zakat on that will cause major inconvenience, and this is their only home, then in that scenario, zakat can be excused. Or what they should do is they should at least give the difference later on, if that is possible to do that. So this is something that can be done. Out of the cautious opinion, though, one should give it, especially when one has the means. They should give it, and this is something which is, of course, yani, to cover the ihtiyat aspect, or the cautious aspect, according to the Zahir Riwaya, or that which is the stronger view or the chosen view in the madhab. So those are some of the questions that we had received this week. We will end there today, inshallah. Once again, if you have any questions, please send an email, mufti@islamstl.org. We will, inshallah, answer your question next week. Wa jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.